Marie Johnson had always carried herself with the grace of someone who had lived many lifetimes in a single one. At 70, she moved through her Miami neighborhood with a quiet confidence that made heads turn, but only a few understood the storm that lingered behind her calm eyes. Losing her husband 5 years ago had left a void so vast that even the bustling streets of Miami could not fill it. She often sat in her sunroom, gazing at the city's skyline, tracing memories like delicate fingers across a photo album. Each photograph told a story of love, joy, and heartbreak. Her eyes lingered on the younger days of her life, remembering laughter, stolen kisses, and nights that never truly ended. There was a question that now haunted her, whispered in the empty corners of her mansion. Could she feel young again? Marie's friends noticed the change in her. Sophia, her closest confidant, often remarked how Marie's laughter had grown sharper, more playful, almost mischievous. But no one knew the real reason behind it. Marie's mind often wandered to daring fantasies, to the idea of seeking companionship in unexpected places. Her heart longed not just for affection but for the thrill of being desired again, of feeling alive in ways she had not in decades. It had been years since she had felt that spark, the electricity that made her pulse quicken. Her late husband had been devoted, but life had dulled their passion with routine. Now, free from the constraints of marriage, she could explore a side of herself that had been buried under decades of propriety. Miami, with its vibrant streets, neon lights, and endless possibilities, suddenly felt like the perfect playground. One afternoon, while browsing a local art gallery in Coral Gables, Marie's eyes fell on someone who would unknowingly change her life. A young man, no more than 30, with dark hair and a boyish charm, stood examining a painting. His intensity and confidence struck her immediately. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled at a part of her soul she had long ignored. She watched him, studying his movements, noticing the subtle gestures that revealed his personality, the way he tilted his head when curious, the gentle tapping of his fingers, the soft furrow of his brow when deep in thought. For Marie, it was more than attraction, it was a spark of possibility. Could this man, who seemed so different from her world, be the one to awaken her long-dormant desires? Sophia noticed the glint in Marie's eyes later that evening over cocktails. "Marie, you're different today," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Something's awakened in you." Marie merely smiled, a secretive curve of her lips. She did not need to explain. She felt alive again, and the thrill of the unknown coursed through her veins. For the first time in years, she was no longer just surviving. She was daring to feel, daring to want, daring to dream. That night, lying in her bed, Marie whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "I am not too old. I am not finished. There is still so much to live for, and someone out there will see me for who I truly am." The desire was no longer just a thought. It was a mission to find joy, passion, and perhaps the one last adventure her heart had been waiting for. Little did Marie know, the man she had noticed in the gallery had seen her too, and something in him stirred, a curiosity he could not ignore. How far would this spark go? Daniel Carter had grown up in Miami, the city's sun and chaos shaping his restless spirit. At 30, he was confident yet curious, a man who thrived on observation. That afternoon in the gallery, when his eyes met Marie's across the room, he felt an unusual pull. It wasn't just curiosity, it was recognition, as if he were looking at someone who carried stories written in silver hair and gentle wrinkles, stories he wanted to read. He watched her as she walked slowly along the paintings, her posture elegant, almost regal. Daniel noticed the way her fingers lightly touched the frame of an abstract painting, a faint smile playing on her lips. There was a life in her eyes, an energy that belied her age, and he found himself drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Most people his age would have dismissed her with a polite nod, but he couldn't. Something about her made him pause, reconsider everything he thought he knew about attraction and desire. Marie, in turn, felt a spark. She had noticed Daniel the moment she entered the gallery. There was a confidence in him, but it wasn't arrogance. He was observant, thoughtful, and somehow aware of her presence in a way that startled her. She felt an unfamiliar thrill run through her chest. At 70, she was supposed to be content, reserved, and dignified, but she wasn't. Not anymore. He took a few steps closer to a painting she had paused at. Their eyes met briefly, and Daniel caught her subtle acknowledgement, a tilt of her head, a small, knowing smile. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to send his imagination spinning. There was a story there, a lifetime of experiences, joys, losses, and somehow, he felt that she might share it, if he only asked. Marie decided to take a risk. She moved toward the cafe corner of the gallery, pretending to examine another display. Daniel followed, almost unconsciously. He ordered a cappuccino, and their paths converged at the counter. For a brief moment, the gallery noise, the background chatter, even the faint clinking of cups faded. It was as if the room had contracted around them, leaving only the electricity between two strangers who might not remain strangers for long. "Beautiful collection," Marie said, her voice smooth, confident, with a subtle undertone of curiosity. "Do you come here often?" Daniel glanced at her, startled slightly by her directness, but intrigued by her elegance and warmth. "I do," he replied. "It's one of my favorite spots to think, away from everything else." His eyes flicked to hers, noticing the silver in her hair, the depth in her gaze. "And you?" "I come here often," Marie said, taking a slow sip of her coffee. "I enjoy watching people, seeing the way they interact with art." Her eyes twinkled. "Some people see a painting, some see a story." Daniel smiled, sensing the subtle challenge in her words. He liked a challenge. He leaned slightly closer, curious. "And what story do you see right now?" Marie's lips curved into a secretive smile. "I see someone interesting, someone who notices things most people overlook." Her words were casual, but her eyes were sharp, measuring him, daring him to respond. The moment stretched, charged with a subtle tension neither could ignore. Daniel realized he was smiling more than usual. His pulse quickened, not because of vanity, but because of the way she looked at him. Openly, honestly, with a spark of playfulness and unspoken intrigue. Marie, on the other hand, felt a flutter in her chest. She was breaking rules she had long held for herself, daring to explore feelings society might consider inappropriate, but she didn't care. Not anymore. Sophia's words from earlier echoed in Marie's mind. "Something's awakened in you." But Marie no longer worried about propriety. She was 70, a widow, and alive in ways she had forgotten. Daniel didn't know it yet, but he was stepping into a story he couldn't predict, and Marie was ready to write the next chapter. As Daniel left the cafe with his coffee, he glanced back. Marie met his gaze, holding it for a heartbeat longer than expected. A silent understanding passed between them, the beginning of something neither of them could yet name, but both felt with startling clarity. That evening, Marie stood on her terrace overlooking the Miami skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars brought to earth. She smiled, thinking of the young man in the gallery. Something had shifted. The dull ache of loneliness had been pierced by curiosity and possibility. She whispered to herself, a mixture of determination and excitement. "This is just the beginning. The story I've been waiting for starts now." The next morning, Marie woke earlier than usual, sunlight spilling across her Miami bedroom. She dressed carefully, choosing a soft silk blouse and tailored skirt that hinted at elegance without revealing too much. Today, she decided, would not be ordinary. Daniel had entered her life in a single glance, and now it was her turn to take control. She rehearsed her plan while sipping her morning coffee on the terrace. Her mission was simple: create an excuse to see Daniel again, to ignite curiosity in him as he had ignited it in her. Miami's art scene offered the perfect opportunity, an exclusive gallery opening later that evening, an event both sophisticated and intimate. She picked up her phone, fingers hovering over the screen, drafting a casual message that carried more than words. "Would you join me at the gallery tonight? There's a painting I think you'd appreciate." Daniel's phone buzzed mid-afternoon. He glanced down and saw her message. Curiosity sparked immediately. The woman he had noticed in the gallery, so different from anyone he'd met, was inviting him to spend time together. His pulse quickened, part excitement, part hesitation. He typed a reply, "I'd be honored to join you. See you tonight." Marie felt a thrill when his reply came through. It was brief, polite, but the weight of it, the promise of attention, of company, of possibility, made her heart beat faster than it had in years. She spent the afternoon preparing, arranging flowers on the dining table, selecting a light perfume that hinted at her presence without being overpowering. Every detail mattered. Tonight would not be ordinary. As dusk fell, Miami transformed. The streets glimmered under neon lights, and the humid air carried the faint scent of salt from nearby Biscayne Bay. Marie arrived at the gallery first, her heels clicking softly against polished marble floors. The soft hum of music, glasses clinking, and quiet conversation greeted her. She could feel the city's pulse, the same pulse that had drawn her and Daniel together the day before. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, his casual sophistication contrasting with Marie's elegance in a way that made the pairing magnetic. He offered a polite nod, but Marie saw the spark in his eyes: curiosity, intrigue, and something unspoken. They moved together through the exhibit, their conversations flowing naturally, yet charged with subtle tension. They stopped in front of a large abstract painting, splashes of gold and crimson swirling across the canvas. Marie leaned slightly closer, allowing her perfume to drift toward Daniel. "Do you see the story?" she asked softly. Her voice was melodic, teasing, inviting interpretation. Daniel studied the painting, then glanced at her. "I see conflict, and yet harmony. Chaos tempered by experience," he replied. His words were careful, almost analytical, but she could sense his mind working to understand her as much as the painting. Marie smiled. She had planted a seed. Conversation flowed easily between them, touching on art, Miami's changing skyline, and the stories they each carried within. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, just a connection, quiet yet electric. She noticed how he listened intently, how his gaze occasionally softened, how his laugh came easily when she teased him about misinterpreting a painting. As the evening progressed, Marie led Daniel to a secluded courtyard behind the gallery, lit by soft lanterns and the fading glow of the Miami sunset. The air was warm, fragrant with jasmine, and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore added a natural rhythm to their conversation. This was no longer just an art event. It was a moment suspended in time, a private world of their own making. Marie decided it was time to push the boundaries gently. "Daniel," she said, voice lower now, intimate, "you have a rare way of seeing the world. Most people don't notice these details. Most people don't notice me." Her gaze held his, steady and unflinching. There was a challenge in her tone, a test of his perception and courage. Daniel felt the electricity of the moment, a rush of adrenaline mingled with curiosity and admiration. He wanted to respond in kind, to match her confidence and daring. "Marie, I notice a lot more than most. But noticing you, that feels different. Important," he said softly, a hint of vulnerability hidden beneath his charm. The night ended with a promise rather than a resolution. They parted with a gentle handshake, lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary. Both knew this encounter was only the beginning, that the dance of curiosity and desire had begun, and neither was willing to step away yet. The spark was lit, the game had begun, but in Miami, passion comes with its risks. How far will they dare to go? Later that evening, Marie returned to her mansion in Coconut Grove, Miami. The estate was bathed in the soft glow of outdoor lanterns, palm trees swaying gently in the humid breeze. Her heart still raced from the gallery encounter. Every detail of Daniel's expression, the subtle warmth in his voice, and the intensity in his gaze played over in her mind. She knew she had to see him again, but this time, somewhere private, somewhere that felt like their own world. Daniel, meanwhile, walked back to his apartment in Brickell, Miami, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and apprehension. He couldn't stop thinking about Marie. She was unlike anyone he'd met, a combination of wisdom, confidence, and a playful daring that challenged him. His friends often teased him about being attracted to women his own age, but Daniel knew this connection was different. It was intellectual, emotional, and undeniably magnetic. By 9 o'clock, Marie had prepared her private terrace for an intimate evening. Soft lanterns lined the railings, and a small table was set with fine china and a bottle of vintage wine. The warm night air carried the faint scent of jasmine from the garden, mingling with the subtle fragrance of her perfume. She was ready, not just to entertain, but to test the boundaries of curiosity and desire. When Daniel arrived, she greeted him with a warm, confident smile. "I hope you like wine," she said softly, her eyes twinkling in the lantern light. "I thought it would make the evening memorable." Daniel chuckled, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "I'm sure it will," he replied, his gaze lingering on her just a second longer than polite, as if trying to read her mind, to understand the woman behind the elegance and mystery. They settled at the table, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke of art, Miami's evolving culture, and memories of their youth, hers decades past, his only years ago. But beneath the words was an undercurrent of tension, a silent game of glances, subtle touches, and shared smiles. Every laugh, every tilt of the head, carried meaning. Marie could feel the electricity, and Daniel sensed it too, though neither dared speak it aloud. Marie poured a small glass of wine for Daniel, her fingers brushing his ever so slightly. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent a shock of awareness through both of them. Marie smiled to herself. She had tested his attentiveness, his sensitivity. Daniel met her gaze, surprised by the intimacy, and smiled back, acknowledging the subtle connection without words. As the night deepened, Marie leaned back in her chair, letting the music from the nearby streets drift toward them. The city's sounds, distant laughter, the hum of traffic, waves crashing softly against the shore, became a backdrop to the unspoken story unfolding between them. "You notice things others don't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I like that about you." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. He had been drawn to her confidence, but her words carried more than praise. They carried challenge, admiration, and a hint of playful daring. "I notice because I care," he said softly, his eyes fixed on hers, letting the words linger between them. Marie laughed softly, a melodic sound that warmed the humid night. "Careful," she teased, "or I might start expecting more." Her words were playful, yet charged with subtle intent. Daniel smiled, accepting the challenge. Their banter was now a delicate dance, each testing the other, pushing boundaries while remaining in control of their emotions. After dessert, Marie gestured toward a quiet corner of the terrace, where a small couch had been placed. "Shall we continue where no one can overhear?" she asked, voice low, intimate. Daniel nodded, feeling a thrill he hadn't anticipated. They settled onto the couch, side by side, yet maintaining the subtle tension of proximity, close enough to feel warmth, far enough to savor anticipation. For hours, they shared stories, Marie recounting memories of youth and love, Daniel revealing moments of ambition, vulnerability, and dreams. The conversation was rich, layered, charged with curiosity and mutual admiration. By the time the city lights dimmed against the night sky, both knew this encounter was no ordinary meeting. Something deeper, something unexpected had begun. When Daniel finally rose to leave, he lingered at the terrace door, hesitant. Marie met his gaze, her eyes steady, inviting, confident. "This night is only the beginning," she said softly. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of her words and the promise they carried. As the door closed behind him, Marie exhaled slowly, a smile playing on her lips. The night had gone exactly as she had hoped, intimate, exhilarating, and daring. The spark between them was no longer subtle, it was a flame waiting to be fanned. And Marie, for the first time in decades, felt alive in a way that made her pulse race with excitement. The spark had grown into a flame, but Miami nights are full of temptation and danger. What happens when desire meets secrets? The morning after their intimate terrace evening, Marie woke to the soft hum of Miami traffic and the faint scent of the sea. She lingered in bed for a moment, replaying every detail of the previous night. The quiet laughter, the subtle touches, the shared glances that said more than words ever could. Her heart still raced, a reminder that life could surprise even someone her age. Yet, the joy was tempered by a familiar unease. Marie's past was not without its complexities. Her late husband, Richard, had been devoted yet strict. Her years of sacrifice had shaped a woman who knew both love and restraint. There were secrets buried deep, choices she had made, love she had let pass. These memories sometimes crept in, whispering caution even as her heart urged her forward. Daniel, on the other hand, felt an unusual energy coursing through him. He replayed the terrace night over and over in his mind, intrigued not just by Marie's allure but by her confidence and mystery. There was something daring about her, a willingness to defy expectations, and Daniel couldn't help but admire it. He knew this connection was rare, and part of him wondered whether he was ready for the storm it might bring. Marie decided to visit Sophia that afternoon. Her friend had always been a confidant, someone who understood both Marie's longing for life and the caution needed in pursuing it. As Marie recounted the gallery and terrace evening, Sophia listened silently, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're playing with fire, Marie," Sophia said softly. "He's young, vibrant, and you're not." Her words were blunt but caring. "Be careful how far you let this go. Desire is one thing, consequence is another." Marie smiled, a mixture of mischief and confidence. "Sophia, I've lived my life within boundaries for too long. Maybe it's time I step beyond them." Her eyes sparkled with daring, a fire that hadn't dimmed despite decades of caution. "Life is too short for hesitation, don't you think?" That evening, as Miami's skyline shifted into neon hues, Daniel returned to his apartment but couldn't focus. His thoughts were consumed by Marie. The intrigue of her life, the stories she carried, the playful confidence she exuded, it all fascinated him. He realized he wanted to know more, to understand the woman behind the elegance and mystery. Meanwhile, Marie prepared for another evening at her terrace, this time determined to reveal more of herself. She arranged fresh flowers, lit lanterns, and selected soft music that would fill the night with warmth and intimacy. Every detail mattered. She wanted Daniel to see not just the elegance, but the life she had carried, the joys and sorrows that had shaped her. When Daniel arrived, Marie greeted him with a warmth that made the Miami night feel like a private world. "I thought you might enjoy some company," she said, her voice soft but inviting. "And I have a few stories I think you'll find enlightening." Daniel's curiosity spiked. He had felt the tension the night before, but Marie's words hinted at a depth he hadn't anticipated. "I'm listening," he said, settling into the couch, eyes fixed on hers. They spoke of art, music, and the rhythms of Miami life, but gradually, Marie led the conversation toward her past. She recounted stories from her youth, loves lost, lessons learned, moments of daring adventure that had shaped her. Daniel listened, rapt, sensing not only wisdom but the thrill of a woman who had lived fully and now dared to embrace desire anew. Marie's voice softened as she spoke of Richard, her late husband. There was no bitterness, only reflection. "We had a good life," she said quietly. "But sometimes, even the best love leaves a part of you longing for more." Daniel felt a pang of empathy and admiration. He realized that beneath her playful exterior lay a woman who had faced life's depths and still dared to desire. By the end of the night, the connection between them had deepened. Words had bridged decades, emotions had intertwined, and curiosity had become something more, a tentative trust, a recognition of kindred spirits. Miami's night hummed softly around them, a perfect witness to the beginning of a dangerous, exhilarating adventure. The past had whispered, the present had answered, but every spark carries a risk. How long before curiosity turns into temptation? The night was warm and humid, the kind that makes Miami feel alive with possibility. Marie stepped out of her mansion into the quiet streets of Coconut Grove, the soft glow of lanterns and neon signs reflecting off the wet pavement. Tonight was different. She wasn't just inviting Daniel into her world. She was stepping into his, embracing the thrill of a connection that defied expectation. Daniel waited nearby, leaning against a sleek sports car under the flickering glow of a street lamp. His casual attire contrasted with Marie's elegant ensemble, but together they made an unusual, magnetic pair. His pulse quickened as she approached, not from nervousness alone, but from the undeniable spark that had begun to grow between them. "Shall we?" Marie asked, her voice soft, teasing, full of playful intent. They entered a nearby rooftop lounge, one of Miami's hidden gems, overlooking the sparkling skyline and Biscayne Bay. The air smelled faintly of salt and tropical flowers, blending with the soft rhythm of distant jazz. Tonight, nothing felt ordinary. Every glance, every smile, carried weight. As they settled into a secluded corner booth, Marie let her gaze wander over Daniel's face. He was younger, yes, but there was a maturity in his eyes, a curiosity that matched hers. "I hope you're ready for a night of surprises," she said with a hint of mischief. Daniel's smile was subtle but charged. "I think I might be," he replied, feeling the electric tension between them. The waiter brought over glasses of sparkling champagne, the bubbles rising like tiny fireworks in the soft light. Marie raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her eyes locking with Daniel's. The clink of crystal seemed louder than it should, reverberating through the quiet corners of their private world. Daniel mirrored her toast, a mix of nerves and excitement swirling inside him. "To new beginnings," he echoed. There was a gravity in their shared words, an acknowledgement that the night might change everything. They spoke, laughed, and shared subtle touches, each moment carefully measured, yet brimming with tension. Marie leaned closer, letting her hand brush Daniel's arm just enough to awaken curiosity. Daniel felt the warmth of her skin, the softness of her presence, and something inside him stirred, a desire not just for company, but for connection, for trust, for intimacy beyond words. The city lights stretched endlessly behind them, and the music became a backdrop to the unspoken story unfolding. Marie's laughter was soft, melodic, and intoxicating. Daniel found himself mesmerized, not by her age or beauty alone, but by the courage and vitality she exuded. There was a world in her eyes, and he wanted to explore it, piece by piece. As the night deepened, Marie suggested a walk along the rooftop garden. Lanterns lined the path, casting golden light over tropical foliage. "Miami is beautiful at night," she said, her voice low and intimate. Daniel nodded, feeling the thrill of a world suspended in time, a world meant only for them, even if only for a few fleeting hours. They paused by the edge of the rooftop, the wind from Biscayne Bay teasing their hair. Marie turned to Daniel, eyes bright with curiosity and daring. "Do you ever feel like life is full of doors we're too afraid to open?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Yes," he admitted. "And sometimes the people who matter most are waiting just on the other side." His words hung between them, vulnerable yet confident, an invitation wrapped in honesty. Marie smiled, a secretive curve of her lips. "Then perhaps tonight we open a few doors," she said softly. The words were more than metaphor. They were a promise, daring them both to step beyond comfort zones into the unknown. Daniel's breath caught slightly. He realized the night wasn't just about curiosity or thrill. It was about trust, connection, and the allure of living fully in a moment that could never be repeated. As they walked back to the lounge, both knew the night had shifted something unspoken between them. Desire had been acknowledged, curiosity had been rewarded, and a new chapter of their story was beginning. A chapter neither could predict, yet both were eager to explore. The doors had been opened, the spark ignited, but every flame casts shadows. How long before their curiosity leads them into temptation they cannot resist? The following morning, Miami hummed with energy, traffic, ocean breeze, and the soft cries of seagulls blending into a familiar soundtrack. Marie stood on her terrace, nursing a cup of tea and replaying the previous night in her mind. Daniel's attentive gaze, the laughter they shared, the subtle brush of hands, all lingered in her memory, a dangerous mix of excitement and longing. But Marie knew that desire could be treacherous. She had lived long enough to understand the cost of reckless passion. Miami, with its glimmering streets and endless opportunities, was a city of temptation. And Daniel, he was young, impressionable, and entirely unaware of the boundaries she usually set. Daniel, meanwhile, walked through Brickell's bustling streets, still feeling the pull of Marie's presence. Every interaction, every glance, every subtle touch from the night before replayed in vivid detail. He couldn't understand fully why she affected him so deeply. She was older, worldly, and experienced, but there was something intoxicating in her confidence, something that made him feel alive in ways he hadn't imagined. Marie decided to take a bold step. That evening, she invited Daniel to a private dinner at a hidden gem in South Beach, a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Atlantic, where the city's neon glow met the endless ocean. "I thought we could enjoy the night differently," she texted, a subtle hint of anticipation in her words. Daniel's reply was immediate. "I'll be there. Can't wait." The simplicity of the message carried more weight than either could articulate. It wasn't just anticipation, it was acknowledgement of the unspoken connection that had begun to form between them. When Daniel arrived, Marie greeted him with a warm, confident smile. Her silk dress glimmered in the soft light of lanterns, her perfume subtle yet alluring. Daniel's gaze lingered, absorbing her elegance and presence, while trying to hide the intensity of the fluttering in his chest. Dinner was served with a gentle rhythm, plates of fresh seafood and tropical flavors that mirrored the vibrancy of Miami. Conversation flowed effortlessly, yet beneath the words was a growing tension, a recognition of attraction, curiosity, and a thrill neither could name aloud. Every glance, every laugh, every brush of hands was charged with possibility. Marie leaned forward slightly, allowing the soft candlelight to illuminate her eyes. "Do you ever feel like life gives us moments we don't fully understand until later?" she asked, her voice low, intimate. Daniel met her gaze, sensing the deeper meaning. "Yes," he admitted, "and sometimes the moments that seem impossible are the ones that change us most." After dinner, Marie suggested a walk along the beachfront. The waves lapped softly against the shore, the moonlight glimmering on the water. Miami at night felt alive and private at once, a stage for secrets and whispered desires. They walked side by side, the silence between them charged with anticipation. At one point, Daniel paused, turning to face her. "Marie, do you ever wonder if we're taking a risk?" he asked, his voice low, carrying both curiosity and hesitation. Marie smiled knowingly, her eyes locking with his. "All the best things in life are a risk," she said. "The question is whether we're brave enough to embrace it." Marie reached out subtly, brushing her fingers against his hand. The touch was fleeting but electrifying, a silent acknowledgement of the tension and attraction between them. Daniel's breath hitched, but he didn't pull away. The Miami night held them in a world of possibility, where desire and curiosity danced dangerously close together. As they returned to the restaurant rooftop, the city lights below shimmered like stars brought to earth. Both were aware of the unspoken, undeniable attraction building between them. Miami's nightlife had provided a stage for their connection, but now reality began to creep in. Desire had been acknowledged, curiosity rewarded, but temptation had also awakened. The temptation had been tasted, the tension undeniable, but in Miami, passion comes with its own consequences. How far will they dare to go before reality catches up? The morning after their moonlit beach walk, Marie awoke to the sound of seagulls and the faint hum of traffic along Coconut Grove. The thrill from the night before lingered like perfume, intoxicating and impossible to ignore. But beneath the excitement was a whisper of caution. Miami was not only vibrant and romantic, it was also a city of gossip, social scrutiny, and hidden dangers. Daniel, meanwhile, walked briskly through the streets of Brickell, replaying every glance and word from the night before. He felt alive, but also aware of the delicate line they were treading. The The connection was intense, thrilling, but the world had rules, and the age difference, society's expectations, and potential judgment loomed as shadows over their growing bond. Marie's phone buzzed mid-morning. A message from Sophia read, "Be careful, Marie. Not everyone is as discreet as you think. This young man, it could get messy." Marie smiled faintly, knowing her friend was only partially wrong. Secrets were part of life, part of allure, but she couldn't let fear dictate her desires. Later that afternoon, Marie decided to host a small gathering at her mansion, inviting a few close friends from her Miami social circle. The house buzzed with conversation, clinking glasses, and laughter. Yet Marie's mind wandered. Daniel wasn't here yet, but she felt his presence in her thoughts, like an invisible thread connecting them across the distance. As the evening drew near, a subtle tension crept into the gathering. Miami's elite were notorious for their curiosity, and Marie sensed a few glances from guests who seemed unusually interested in her personal life. She reminded herself to stay poised, but the thought of external scrutiny made her more aware of the choices she had made and the risks she was embracing with Daniel. Daniel arrived later that evening, the soft glow of lanterns and chandeliers illuminating Marie's elegance. He was greeted with warm smiles, polite handshakes, but he could sense the unspoken curiosity directed at him. Marie's confidence remained unwavering, yet Daniel noticed the subtle social dynamics at play, the eyes, the judgment, the whispers that hovered just beyond polite conversation. The night wore on, and Marie finally found a moment to pull Daniel aside. They slipped into the mansion's private library, the room dimly lit with golden lamps and lined with bookshelves reaching the ceiling. It was a world apart from the social chaos outside, intimate and safe, a sanctuary where they could speak freely. Marie's voice lowered, intimate. "Miami is beautiful, but it has eyes everywhere," she said softly. "People talk, and not all whispers are harmless." Daniel nodded, understanding that their connection, no matter how genuine, existed in a world that could judge and misunderstand. "Then we must be careful," he said, "but careful doesn't mean we stop feeling." Marie reached out, her fingers brushing Daniel's arm in reassurance. "I know," she whispered. "I've lived long enough to understand the stakes. But life is too short to let fear rule our choices. Are you willing to trust me?" Daniel's gaze held hers, steady and vulnerable. "Yes," he said softly, a mixture of certainty and excitement in his voice. They stood together in silence for a moment, the library around them heavy with unspoken emotion. The city lights from the windows flickered like distant stars, a reminder that Miami was both their playground and their obstacle. Outside, whispers and glances persisted, but inside, trust and desire held sway. Finally, Marie spoke again, voice low and teasing. "Sometimes, the thrill isn't just in the moment, it's at risk." Daniel's eyes sparkled with understanding. He knew the danger, yet the temptation, the pull toward Marie, was irresistible. They were walking a fine line, caught between desire, trust, and the shadows of Miami's social scene. The shadows of curiosity had deepened, and whispers had begun to follow them. Will desire survive the scrutiny, or will temptation bring consequences they cannot escape? The next morning, Miami's sun rose in fiery streaks across Biscayne Bay. Marie sipped her coffee on the terrace, still feeling the lingering thrill from the previous night's secret library conversation. Every memory of Daniel, the warmth of his presence, the intensity of his gaze, made her pulse quicken. But her tranquility was suddenly broken by the soft chime of her front gate bell. Marie descended the grand staircase, curiosity and caution mingling in her steps. When she opened the door, she froze. Standing there was Helena, a sharp-eyed woman from Miami's elite social circle, someone who had always been observant, judgmental, and deeply involved in the city's gossip network. Her smile was polite, but her eyes carried subtle scrutiny. "Marie," Helena said smoothly, stepping inside without invitation. "I hope I'm not disturbing anything important." Her tone was light, but Marie sensed the underlying tension, the unspoken questions and quiet scrutiny she had always wielded like a weapon in social settings. Marie led her to the living room, maintaining poise and grace. "Of course, Helena." "Coffee?" she asked, masking the quickened pulse in her chest. Helena's eyes, however, lingered briefly on the surroundings, subtly assessing the details. Recent flowers on the table, the terrace door left open, and the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air. "I just wanted to catch up," Helena began, her voice carefully casual. "It's been so long since we truly spoke." Marie nodded politely, keeping her smile intact. But in the back of her mind, she wondered if Helena had actually come to judge or to find information about her personal life, specifically her growing connection with Daniel. Marie's mind raced. She could not allow Helena to discover anything about Daniel. Not yet. She had carefully maintained her privacy, and any misstep could expose the delicate balance she and Daniel were building. "It's true," she said smoothly. "We've been busy, but life always finds a way to keep us entertained, doesn't it?" Her words were light, but they carried a hint of challenge. Helena raised an eyebrow, sensing both elegance and subtle defiance in Marie. "Indeed," she said, tilting her head slightly. But she didn't press further, choosing instead to steer the conversation towards safe topics: Miami culture, gallery openings, charity events. Marie allowed the conversation to drift, carefully controlling the narrative while keeping her private life secure. After what felt like hours, Helena finally rose to leave. "I must say, Marie," she said, voice smooth but edged with curiosity, "you always seem to live life with a certain boldness. Quite admirable." She paused briefly, eyes flicking toward the terrace. "Just be mindful, boldness has consequences." Then, with a polite nod, she departed, leaving Marie both relieved and unsettled. Marie exhaled slowly, feeling the rush of adrenaline. Helena's visit had reminded her that their connection existed not only in a bubble of intimacy, but also within a city that was always watching. She realized that her growing bond with Daniel would soon face real challenges, not from desire, but from scrutiny and judgment. Minutes later, Daniel arrived at the mansion, his presence immediately grounding her. He could sense the tension in the air, the faint ripple left behind by Helena's visit. "Everything okay?" he asked gently, taking her hand in his. Marie smiled, grateful for the young man's steady presence. "Yes," she said softly, "but it seems our private world may not stay so private for long." Marie led him to the terrace, where the city lights glittered like 1,000 tiny stars. "Miami has eyes everywhere," she whispered. "But what we have, it's ours to protect. Are you willing to trust me?" Daniel's gaze met hers, unwavering. "Always," he said simply. Their hands intertwined, a silent promise against a backdrop of glimmering lights and looming social challenges. The shadows of scrutiny had arrived, but desire had found its anchor. Will trust and passion survive Miami's watchful eyes? The next evening, Marie received an invitation to an exclusive gallery opening in Wynwood, one of Miami's trendiest art districts. The event promised Miami's elite, modern art, and subtle whispers that traveled faster than the ocean breeze. Marie glanced at Daniel, who was sitting at her terrace with a glass of wine. "Shall we?" she asked, her eyes glinting with a mixture of mischief and challenge. Daniel's eyes lit up with intrigue. "Absolutely," he replied, standing and taking her hand. There was a quiet electricity between them, a shared understanding that tonight would test both their composure and the strength of the connection that had grown between them. At the gallery, the energy was electric. Miami's elite mingled, glasses of champagne clinked, and abstract art covered the walls like silent witnesses to whispered conversations. Marie and Daniel walked side by side, observing the scene. Their presence drew glances, some curious, some admiring, and a few subtly judgmental. Marie's friend Sophia had arrived unexpectedly and approached them with a knowing smile. "I see you brought company," Sophia said, glancing at Daniel. Marie felt a thrill of excitement, tempered by awareness. Miami's gossip networks moved fast. "Yes," she replied smoothly, "he's a connoisseur of art and conversation." As they moved deeper into the gallery, Daniel noticed a familiar face. "Helena, the socialite who had visited Marie's mansion. She was dressed impeccably, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Marie and Daniel. Helena's gaze was deliberate, evaluating, and Daniel felt a flicker of tension. Helena approached, her smile polite but edged with scrutiny. "Marie," she said smoothly, "what a surprise to see you here, and with company." Marie's smile was composed, confident. "Helena," she replied, "Miami's art scene is full of surprises." Daniel sensed the unspoken challenge in Helena's words, a social test he didn't fully understand but could feel in his chest. The three exchanged small talk, navigating the room with champagne flutes and polite nods. Marie felt the subtle pressure of social observation, yet Daniel's presence beside her was grounding. Their connection had strengthened over the past weeks, and he now served not only as companion but as anchor, someone who could navigate scrutiny with grace and authenticity. As they admired a large abstract painting, Daniel leaned closer to Marie and whispered, "This is like a test, isn't it?" Marie's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Yes," she replied softly. "But sometimes the test isn't about art, it's about composure, connection, and trust." Daniel nodded, understanding the stakes. Suddenly, Helena moved slightly, drawing attention to herself. "I always admire how you handle attention, Marie," she said. "Few women can navigate Miami's social scene with such elegance and yet maintain mystery." Her words were complimentary but carried a challenge, an unspoken probe into Marie's personal life and her relationship with Daniel. Marie responded with a poised smile, letting her eyes meet Daniel's briefly. "Elegance is not about what people see," she said, "but about how we choose to carry ourselves in every situation." Her words were deliberate, subtly reminding both Helena and the room that she controlled her narrative. The night continued, filled with art, subtle social maneuvers, and whispered glances. Daniel realized that in Miami, desire, trust, and social perception were constantly intertwined. Every smile, every touch, every word mattered. He understood now that protecting their connection required vigilance, as much as passion. By the end of the evening, Helena departed with her sharp smile, leaving Marie and Daniel alone on the gallery terrace overlooking Miami's skyline. They exhaled in relief, a shared acknowledgement that they had passed the unspoken social test. The city lights shimmered below like tiny guardians of their secret bond, and both knew that while the night had been a challenge, it had also strengthened their trust. The test had been passed, but Miami's social currents run deep. What happens when desire, trust, and temptation collide under the city's watchful eyes? The night air in Miami was sultry, the city alive with neon signs, the distant echo of music from beach clubs, and the rhythmic hum of the ocean waves. Marie adjusted her silk scarf as she stepped into Daniel's car, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Tonight wasn't just another social gathering, it was a night they both sensed could change everything. Daniel drove them to a hidden speakeasy in downtown Miami, a dimly lit venue known only to those who sought both luxury and secrecy. As they entered, the smell of aged wood, leather, and faint perfume enveloped them. Candlelight flickered across faces, and soft jazz filled the intimate space, creating a private world amidst the city's chaos. Marie led the way to a secluded booth, their proximity immediately charged with subtle tension. The room was small, intimate, and private, perfect for whispered conversations and moments stolen from the world. As they settled in, Daniel could feel the electricity of the night, a pull he hadn't anticipated, stronger than any desire he had felt before. "You've grown braver," Daniel whispered, his voice low but tinged with awe. Marie's smile was mysterious, confident. "Life is too short to hide behind caution," she replied softly. "And sometimes, the nights that seem dangerous are the ones worth taking." Her words made Daniel shiver slightly, not from fear, but from the thrill of shared daring. They ordered drinks, their hands brushing lightly across the table. Each touch carried electricity, an unspoken acknowledgement of attraction, curiosity, and trust. Daniel found himself mesmerized by Marie's elegance, her effortless control over the night, and the intensity of the connection growing between them. A jazz trio played in the corner, the music weaving a spell around the intimate patrons. Marie leaned closer, sharing stories of her travels, her past loves, and moments of defiance that had shaped her life. Daniel listened, captivated not just by her words, but by the life she had lived, the wisdom she exuded, and the way she carried herself in every room. As the evening deepened, Marie excused herself briefly to the bar. Daniel watched her move gracefully through the space, feeling both admiration and a fluttering tension. He realized that every glance she threw back at him carried meaning, desire, invitation, and trust all rolled into a single expression. When she returned, Marie brought a glass of whiskey, setting it gently in front of Daniel. "To courage," she said softly, her eyes locking with his. Daniel mirrored her toast, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The night seemed to stretch, every moment heavier, richer, and more intoxicating than the last. Their conversation shifted from light topics to more personal confessions, dreams, regrets, and the things they longed for but rarely admitted. Each shared secret built trust, tightening the invisible thread connecting them. Daniel felt a vulnerability in Marie that matched his own, making the night not only thrilling but deeply intimate. Marie leaned back slightly, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes the most daring act isn't in what you do, but in letting yourself feel fully, without hesitation." Daniel's pulse quickened. "I think I understand," he whispered. "And I'm willing to try." As the night wore on, their connection intensified. Words became less necessary, glances and touches conveying what neither could yet say aloud. Miami's city lights outside the window seemed distant, irrelevant. Here, in this speakeasy, time belonged only to them. Desire, curiosity, and trust were entwined, forming a bond neither could ignore. The night had ignited something undeniable, a spark that neither could ignore. But every flame cast shadows, and Miami's secrets were waiting to test them. The morning after their clandestine night at the speakeasy, Miami's streets were bathed in golden sunlight, but Marie felt a strange heaviness. The thrill of last night's closeness with Daniel lingered, yet so did the awareness that the city around them never slept quietly. Gossip, curiosity, and temptation moved faster than the ocean breeze, and she knew it was only a matter of time before their private moments would face tests from the outside world. Daniel arrived mid-morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a tentative smile. "Good morning," he said softly, handing her 1 cup. Marie accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly, sending a subtle thrill through both of them. The touch reminded her that desire could be grounding, but also dangerous if exposed too soon. "I've been thinking," Marie began, sipping her coffee, "about last night and how quickly a connection can turn into temptation if we aren't careful." Daniel nodded, understanding that her words were not just a warning but a test of their mutual trust. "I feel the same," he replied, "but the pull is strong." That afternoon, a surprise knock on Marie's door interrupted their quiet moment. When she opened it, she found Victor, a suave Miami socialite with a reputation for charm and flirtation. His eyes immediately landed on Daniel. "Marie," he said smoothly, "what a pleasure to see you. And a friend I don't recognize?" Victor's presence immediately created tension. Marie maintained her poise, introducing Daniel carefully. "Victor, this is Daniel." "Daniel, Victor." The handshake was cordial but charged, the undercurrent of Miami social power and intrigue impossible to ignore. Daniel noticed Victor's sharp gaze, assessing him, not just as a guest, but as someone who might challenge his place in Marie's world. Victor smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "I see why everyone admires your taste, Marie," he said, glancing at Daniel. "And your company must be intriguing." His words were complimentary, but carried an unspoken challenge, testing both Marie's composure and Daniel's confidence. Marie chose her words carefully, her tone cool, yet playful. "Victor, Miami is full of surprises, isn't it? And sometimes the best ones are unexpected." Daniel, sensing the unspoken challenge, mirrored her subtle confidence, standing tall beside her. This was their first real test of unity, and neither would falter. Victor stayed for drinks, attempting to engage Daniel with probing questions and subtle flirtation. Daniel responded with calm composure, slowly gaining confidence in his presence alongside Marie. Every glance between Marie and Daniel strengthened their unspoken bond, signaling that their trust was not easily shaken, even by Miami's sharpest social predators. Later, Marie suggested they move to the terrace for privacy. The city lights twinkled below like silent witnesses to the unspoken bond between them. "Victor is harmless," Marie whispered, "but his presence reminds us temptation can appear in many forms." Daniel nodded, realizing that trust was more than emotion. It was vigilance, a shared responsibility to protect their connection. They shared a quiet moment of laughter and warmth, letting the intensity of the day settle. Daniel realized that while desire had been ignited, the real challenge was navigating temptation without losing themselves or each other. Marie's eyes held both wisdom and mischief, showing him that courage in love was just as important as passion. As the night deepened, the wind from Biscayne Bay teased their hair, and the city below whispered secrets that only Miami could hold. They understood that the spark between them was more than fleeting desire. It was a connection forged in trust, curiosity, and courage. And yet, the shadows of temptation lingered, waiting for the next opportunity to test them. Temptation had arrived disguised as charm, and trust had been tested, but Miami had more shadows in store. How long before desire and danger collide? That evening, Marie and Daniel decided to escape the familiar confines of her mansion. The streets of Miami glowed under neon signs, reflecting on wet pavement after a brief afternoon rain. The city seemed alive with whispers, secrets, and possibilities. Marie's hand brushed against Daniel's as they walked, a small but deliberate gesture that tethered them together amid the vibrant chaos. They arrived at a private rooftop lounge atop a hidden hotel in Wynwood. The space was bathed in violet and gold light, with panoramic views of Miami's skyline. The music was soft, sultry, perfect for whispered conversation, subtle flirtation, and the unspoken acknowledgement of mutual desire. Marie guided Daniel to a secluded corner, shielded from the other patrons. Here, the city felt distant. The gentle hum of conversation and the ocean breeze created a private bubble where tension, attraction, and trust could be explored without interference. Daniel's pulse quickened. The night felt different, charged with possibility. "I like this," Daniel murmured, glancing around at the glowing city below. "It's like we're in our own world." Marie's eyes sparkled, her smile mysterious. "Miami allows us moments like these," she replied softly. "But only if we're brave enough to claim them." A waiter brought a bottle of champagne, and Marie poured 2 flutes. Their hands touched as they exchanged glasses, lingering just a second too long. The subtle contact sent a thrill through both of them. Each gesture, glance, and smile was a silent language, a dance of desire and trust that needed no words. As the night deepened, their conversation turned to memories. Daniel shared stories of his youth, dreams, and fears. Marie spoke of decades lived, loves lost, and moments of boldness she had never regretted. Each confession drew them closer, creating emotional intimacy alongside the unspoken physical tension simmering between them. Marie leaned back slightly, her eyes catching the glint of the city lights. "Do you know why I sought you out?" she asked quietly. Daniel's heart raced. I have an idea," he whispered. She smiled knowingly. "Because some connections are rare, and life doesn't always give second chances." Her words were bold, intimate, and slightly dangerous. A soft jazz song began to play over the speakers. Marie rose, extending her hand to Daniel. "Dance with me?" she asked. He took her hand eagerly. On the small rooftop, with the city as their witness, they moved in sync, the music wrapping around them like a shared secret. The dance was a flirtation, a play of proximity and distance, glances and smiles. Daniel felt a mix of awe and nervousness. Marie's confidence and elegance were intoxicating. Each step, each subtle touch reinforced the trust they had built, while the thrill of desire hummed just beneath the surface. Marie paused briefly, resting her head lightly against Daniel's shoulder. The intimacy was breathtaking, almost fragile. "Miami has a way of testing us," she whispered. "But it's these moments, moments of courage and desire, that make life unforgettable." Daniel's hand tightened slightly around hers, an unspoken promise to honor both the thrill and the trust. The city below seemed distant, irrelevant. For these fleeting hours, the world had shrunk to just them, their laughter, whispers, and glances intertwining with the gentle night air. Desire had awakened fully, trust had solidified, and for the first time, Daniel realized that this connection was not fleeting, it was something rare, profound, and impossible to ignore. The night had ignited more than desire, it had tested trust and deepened connection. But in Miami, shadows linger, and temptation is never far behind. The next morning, Miami was already alive with its usual energy, sunlight glinting off Biscayne Bay, traffic humming, and the faint scent of salt in the air. Marie walked along her terrace, wrapped in a silk robe, replaying last night's rooftop encounter in her mind. The thrill, intimacy, and trust shared with Daniel had been unforgettable. Yet, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that their private bubble might soon face intrusion. Daniel arrived with breakfast, carrying a tray of fresh fruit, croissants, and coffee. "Good morning," he said softly, smiling. Marie returned the smile, but there was tension under her calm exterior. "Good morning," she replied, her voice smooth, yet carrying the weight of unspoken concern. Their fingers brushed briefly as he handed her the coffee, a small grounding connection amidst the subtle anxiety. No sooner had they settled into the morning, a soft knock echoed through the mansion. Marie's heart skipped a beat. Visitors at this hour were unusual. She opened the door to find Helena, the sharp-eyed socialite who had previously tested her composure. Helena's smile was polite but cold, and in her hand was an envelope, unmarked, mysterious. "Marie," Helena said smoothly, her voice calm yet calculated. "This came for you earlier, and I thought it best to deliver it personally." Marie's mind raced. Who could be sending an anonymous letter? What secrets might it hold? Helena's presence was deliberate, a reminder that Miami's social currents were never idle. Marie took the envelope carefully, her fingers brushing Helena's briefly, a small, deliberate touch asserting dominance over the moment. "Thank you," she said, her tone neutral. Helena's eyes lingered for a heartbeat, and Marie felt a subtle undercurrent of challenge, as though Helena expected something to be revealed. Once Helena departed, Marie and Daniel moved to the private library. With the envelope on the table, Marie carefully broke the seal. Inside was a photograph, an image of her and Daniel, taken discreetly from the night at the rooftop lounge. There was also a short note. "Miami sees everything. Choose carefully." Daniel's eyes widened. "Someone's watching us," he said quietly, the weight of the city's scrutiny suddenly tangible. Marie's heart pounded, but she maintained her composure. "Miami isn't just a city of lights and romance," she said softly. "It's a city of shadows. And someone is reminding us of that." They spent the morning strategizing, understanding that their secret encounters had attracted unwanted attention. Marie realized the delicate balance between desire and discretion. Each moment of passion now had the risk of exposure. Daniel, though younger and less experienced, demonstrated remarkable composure, offering suggestions to keep their connection secure while continuing to explore intimacy privately. Marie's phone buzzed unexpectedly. A message from an unknown number appeared. "We know what you're doing. Be careful." She felt a shiver run through her. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on hers. "We'll handle it," he said firmly. "Together." Marie nodded, drawing strength from the trust they had built. The rest of the day passed in careful navigation. Every visitor, every phone call, every knock on the door carried a potential threat. Yet, beneath the tension, their connection deepened. Daniel's presence became a source of courage, and Marie's guidance and wisdom reinforced the foundation of trust they were building in a world increasingly aware of their secret. By nightfall, the mansion felt safer, though the shadow of observation lingered. They shared a quiet dinner, a mix of laughter, whispered encouragement, and subtle flirtation. Despite the city's watchful eyes, the night reminded them of the core truth. They were a team, navigating both passion and peril, forging a bond strengthened by trust and desire. Their secret was no longer safe, and Miami's shadows had found them. But would trust, desire, and courage be enough to survive the next revelation? The next morning, the Miami sun blazed over Biscayne Bay, glittering off the water like scattered diamonds. Marie stood on her terrace, coffee in hand, her thoughts racing. The photograph and the anonymous message from yesterday had left her restless. Miami's streets, its neon glow, and social currents suddenly felt more like a maze filled with hidden observers than the playground of luxury and desire she had once imagined. Daniel joined her moments later, carrying a tray of breakfast and a reassuring smile. "Morning," he said softly. His presence grounded her, a steady force against the sudden weight of threat. Marie handed him a coffee and exhaled.
"Morning."
"We're no longer invisible," she admitted. Daniel frowned, scanning the streets below, his young mind realizing the depth of scrutiny that now shadowed them. As they sat down to eat, Marie's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "We're closer than you think. Your secret won't last." Her pulse quickened. Daniel, noticing her reaction, reached out, covering her hand with his. "We handle it together," he said firmly, locking eyes with her. Marie nodded, silently drawing strength from the young man who had quickly become both confidant and anchor. Later that afternoon, as Marie walked through her gardens, she felt eyes on her. Not the anonymous observer, but subtle glances from neighbors, passers-by, even delivery people, all small, seemingly inconsequential, yet connected in ways she couldn't see. Daniel noticed her vigilance and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "We have to be careful," he said. "Miami's gaze is relentless." A knock at the door interrupted them. This time, it was Victor, the charming socialite who had previously tested them. His smile was deliberate, almost predatory. "Marie," he said smoothly, "I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought we could talk." His presence, once merely flirtatious, now carried a subtle threat, a reminder that their private lives were no longer entirely their own. Marie's composure did not falter. She introduced Daniel formally, her tone deliberate and cool. "Victor, this is Daniel." "Daniel, Victor." Daniel's gaze met Victor's, unflinching. For the first time, he fully realized that Miami's social jungle required confidence, poise, and strategic navigation as much as desire and trust. Victor leaned in slightly, his tone casual yet probing. "You two are quite the pair. Quite intriguing." His eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to Marie. The subtext was clear: curiosity, judgment, and unspoken challenge. Marie smiled lightly. "Intriguing can be dangerous," she said. "And sometimes danger is exactly what life needs." Victor lingered briefly before departing, leaving Marie and Daniel alone again. The moment reinforced a sobering reality. Miami was a city of eyes, whispers, and power plays. Desire and trust alone would not shield them. They needed strategy, awareness, and unspoken codes to preserve their private world. That evening, Marie and Daniel sat on the terrace, overlooking the city lights shimmering on Biscayne Bay. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. "We've been tested," Marie whispered, her eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "But every challenge strengthens what we share." Daniel nodded, holding her hand tightly. "Then we faced the shadows together," he said. As the night deepened, both realized that trust, desire, and courage were now intertwined. Every glance from the outside world could spark danger or temptation, but together, they had built a bond resilient enough to withstand Miami's relentless watchfulness. Yet the city's secrets had only begun to surface, and their next challenge was lurking closer than they imagined. Their secret was no longer safe, and Miami's shadows had grown bolder. Would trust, courage, and desire be enough to protect what they had built? Late that night, the mansion was quiet except for the distant hum of the city and the gentle lap of waves against the shore. Marie sat in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, savoring the solitude. Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching her with quiet admiration. Their connection had grown stronger over weeks of trust, desire, and subtle danger. But tonight, that bond would face a challenge neither had anticipated. A sharp knock at the door shattered the calm. Marie's eyes narrowed. Visitors at this hour were unusual, and in Miami, unusual often meant trouble. Daniel stepped beside her, a silent show of solidarity. "I'll handle this," he whispered. Marie nodded, her pulse quickening. Marie opened the door cautiously. Standing there was Victor, the socialite whose previous encounters had been both charming and probing. This time, however, his demeanor was different, intense, deliberate, and almost threatening. "Marie," he said, his tone low, "we need to talk privately." Daniel moved slightly in front of Marie, his protective instincts flaring. "I think we need to be clear. This is our private space," he said firmly. Victor's smirk widened, his eyes flicking to Daniel with a mixture of amusement and challenge. "I know exactly whose space this is," Victor replied smoothly, "but there are things you should know. Miami isn't as forgiving as you think." Marie's composure remained intact, though her mind raced. She gestured toward the sitting room. "Talk," she said calmly. Victor entered, leaving Daniel standing protectively nearby. The socialite's eyes never left Daniel's face as he spoke, as if testing the young man's resolve, courage, and loyalty to Marie. Victor leaned casually against a grand bookshelf, his voice smooth but edged with warning. "I've seen what's happening," he said. "Photographs, messages, people are talking. Miami's elite aren't kind to secrets like yours. You may think you control the narrative, but the city has other plans." Marie's eyes met Daniel's briefly, a silent exchange of reassurance and strategy. "We've built trust, and we've been careful," she said, her voice calm but assertive. "No one has the right to dictate our lives or connections." Victor's smirk softened slightly, acknowledging her resolve, though he did not retreat. "Be aware," he said, "Miami rewards caution and punishes overconfidence." After a tense pause, Victor turned to leave, but not before adding a final remark. "Enjoy your evening. But know this, the city is watching." Marie closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a brief moment. Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulder, offering strength. "We can handle this," he whispered. "Together." That night, Marie and Daniel sat on the terrace overlooking Miami's sparkling skyline. The city's lights were breathtaking, but now they carried an undertone of caution. "The city is dangerous," Marie murmured, "but desire, trust, and courage can be stronger than fear." Daniel nodded, realizing that their bond had been tested and survived. As the wind from Biscayne Bay brushed past them, both understood a vital truth. The threat of exposure would never fully disappear, but together they had cultivated a connection resilient enough to face Miami's shadows. And yet, a part of both of them knew the city had more challenges ahead, tests that would push trust, desire, and courage to the edge. Victor had left, but Miami's eyes were everywhere. The city's secrets weren't finished with them, and the next test would come from a place they least expected. Marie and Daniel woke to another humid Miami morning, the sunlight reflecting off the bay like molten gold. Their terrace, normally a sanctuary, now felt like a watchtower. Every neighbor, passerby, or delivery truck might conceal someone observing, recording, or waiting to interfere. The city had become a subtle predator, its shadows merging with desire and secrecy. As Daniel poured coffee, Marie noticed a car parked unusually close to the mansion entrance. The driver lingered, phone in hand, glancing toward the property with a calculating gaze. "Someone's here," she murmured, instinct sharpening her instincts. Daniel's eyes followed hers, narrowing in focus. "We need to be smart," he said. "No impulsive moves." Before they could act, a soft knock came from the terrace's side door, unexpected and unfamiliar. Marie's heart raced. The knock was deliberate, almost casual, but Daniel recognized the potential danger. "I'll check," he whispered, moving to the door with measured steps. Marie followed quietly, holding a small but elegant letter opener, a precaution, though unnecessary most mornings. As Daniel opened the door, a young woman stepped in, mid-20s, dressed in stylish but understated Miami fashion. Her smile was friendly, almost innocent, but the subtle tension in her eyes betrayed experience and intent. "Hi, I'm Lena," the woman said smoothly. "I've been sent to deliver a message, and perhaps meet you personally." Daniel's brow furrowed. Marie stepped forward, eyes sharp. "Sent by whom?" she asked. Lena hesitated, her smile flickering. "I was asked to ensure you both understand the attention Miami has on you." Daniel's protective instincts flared. "Attention?" he asked. "Do you mean threats, gossip, or?" Lena's smile was cryptic. "A little of everything. Some of Miami's social circles are curious about your connection. They think it's unconventional, and some don't approve." Her gaze flicked briefly to Marie, lingering, almost testing her reaction. Marie's composure remained flawless. She studied Lena carefully, reading both words and subtext. "And you?" she asked softly. "Do you judge us or merely deliver messages?" Lena's smile widened subtly. "I report, I observe, and sometimes I influence." Marie felt the weight of Miami's social machinery in that single sentence, the complexity of desire, secrecy, and power colliding. Lena handed over a small envelope, sealed but simple. "Open this when you're alone," she said. "It contains truths or risks you should know about. Consider it a courtesy or a warning." With that, she turned and left as silently as she arrived. Daniel closed the door, his jaw tight. Marie held the envelope for a moment, feeling its weight. Not just paper, but possibility. They moved inside, settling into the library. The envelope contained photographs, recently taken, some intimate moments from the rooftop lounge, and even candid shots from the terrace. A note accompanied them. "Miami knows. Decisions have consequences. Choose wisely." Daniel's hand brushed against Marie's as she absorbed the warning. "We've been noticed more closely than we imagined," he said quietly. Marie took a deep breath, her mind racing yet focused. "This city, it tests desire with danger and trust with exposure," she said softly. Daniel nodded, the weight of responsibility evident on his young face. "We've survived challenges before," he reminded her, "and we'll handle this too, together." The bond between them, strengthened by weeks of intimacy, vigilance, and courage, had become nearly unbreakable. That night, the city's lights glittered below as they stood on the terrace, contemplating the risks ahead. Miami's social web was relentless, its eyes everywhere, but Marie and Daniel had learned that desire, trust, and courage could navigate even the sharpest intrigue. And somewhere in the city, Lena's observation hinted at the next test, a challenge that would not only involve secrecy, but temptation itself. The intruder was gone, but her warning lingered. Miami's social machinery had taken note, and soon desire, secrecy, and danger would collide in ways they never expected. The next evening, Miami was drenched in amber light as the sun dipped below the skyline. Marie and Daniel prepared for a discreet dinner at a private, high-end restaurant in Coral Gables, a place known for secrecy among the city's elite. Every choice now carried weight. Their presence, their movements, even their body language could be observed and dissected by the city's watchful eyes. As they settled into a secluded booth, the subtle hum of conversation surrounded them, the restaurant dimly lit with candlelight. Daniel poured Marie a glass of wine, their fingers brushing lightly, a gesture that reaffirmed trust amidst tension. Marie's gaze swept the room, noting entrances, exits, and potential observers. Miami had made them vigilant, turning every moment of pleasure into a calculated risk. Their meal began in relative silence, punctuated by soft laughter and quiet conversation. Then, at a nearby table, Lena appeared, stylish, confident, her presence deliberate. She made eye contact with Marie, holding it just long enough to communicate awareness, then returned to her own seat without a word. The unspoken message was clear. She was monitoring, evaluating, testing their composure. Marie's eyes narrowed slightly, but remained composed. "She's here," she whispered to Daniel, keeping her voice low. Daniel's hand rested over hers under the table, a silent affirmation of unity. "We control how we respond," he murmured. Together, they understood that maintaining composure was their first line of defense. As the evening progressed, Lena approached their table under the pretense of casual inquiry. "Marie, Daniel, I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to ensure everything is understood." Her tone was smooth, professional, yet loaded with subtle pressure. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, protective instincts igniting. Marie held Lena's gaze with unshakable poise. "We understand perfectly," she said softly, her voice cool yet commanding. Daniel added firmly, "We make our own choices." The subtle defiance in their combined stance sent a clear message: no threat, subtle or otherwise, could destabilize the bond they had nurtured. Lena smiled faintly, recognizing their resolve. "Very well," she said, retreating gracefully. Her presence, though fleeting, had reminded them that Miami's social network was intricately connected, watchful, calculating, and occasionally dangerous. Marie exhaled, leaning back slightly. "We can't let anyone disrupt what we have," she said, her voice low but determined. Daniel reached across the table, taking Marie's hand in both of his. "Every challenge strengthens us," he said quietly. "Miami may watch, test, or tempt us, but our connection is ours alone." Marie's eyes softened, reflecting pride, desire, and the calm resolve of a woman who had learned to navigate both life and danger. By the time dessert arrived, the pair had settled into a delicate rhythm, alert yet intimate, cautious yet affectionate. The city outside glittered like a field of watchful eyes, but within the booth, Marie and Daniel created their own microcosm, a space of desire, trust, and careful strategy. As they left the restaurant, the Miami night greeted them with a mixture of wind, neon, and possibility. Lena's observation, Victor's warnings, and the city's subtle scrutiny were constant reminders. Their bond could be tested at any moment. But the trust, courage, and desire that had grown between them were now their strongest shields. Miami's watchers had made their move, but the city had more shadows in store. Would desire and trust be enough when the next test arrived unannounced? The morning after their discreet dinner, Miami glimmered in golden sunlight. Marie walked through her garden, the subtle breeze teasing the edges of her silk robe. Despite the city's relentless scrutiny, she felt a mix of anticipation and unease. Every day now carried a potential for discovery and desire. She glanced toward Daniel, who was tending to the terrace plants, his calm presence a grounding force. A sleek black car pulled up outside the mansion, and from it stepped a striking man in his early 40s. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, confidence radiating from his every movement. He introduced himself as Raphael, a consultant who had been sent by an anonymous Miami social circle to advise Marie on maintaining discretion and influence. His tone was smooth, but Marie sensed the subtle undercurrent. This was not just advice, it was observation, wrapped in charm. Raphael's presence immediately created tension. Daniel instinctively positioned himself slightly in front of Marie, shielding her while observing Raphael closely. "We're not accustomed to unsolicited advice," Marie said politely but firmly. Raphael smiled faintly, recognizing both her poise and her power. "Consider it a courtesy," he said. "Miami rewards discretion and punishes recklessness." As Raphael spoke, Marie noticed his glances toward Daniel, measuring, evaluating. The young man's protective stance didn't go unnoticed. "He's trying to test us," Marie whispered to Daniel, her voice low, a subtle mix of amusement and caution. Daniel nodded, acknowledging that this encounter was as much a challenge of composure as a social maneuver. Raphael suggested they move indoors, offering a private study as a neutral space. Once inside, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken evaluation. Raphael began to speak of Miami's elite, the subtle networks, and the influence of whispers in high society. Every word was carefully chosen, designed to probe without alarming, and every glance at Daniel seemed to gauge his reactions. Marie maintained composure, her voice smooth and confident. "We understand Miami's complexities," she said. "But influence and discretion work both ways. Mutual respect is key." Raphael's eyes flicked to Daniel briefly, as if acknowledging the young man's growing presence in Marie's life and influence. Daniel's calm response impressed Raphael, who leaned back, reassessing both of them. After a tense discussion of social dynamics, Raphael finally revealed the reason for his visit. "There are whispers about unconventional relationships," he said, carefully choosing his words. "Some are curious, others judgmental. Miami watches closely. Desire, trust, and discretion can be fragile. Sometimes, guidance is necessary." Marie's eyes met Daniel's briefly, silently agreeing. They would not allow social pressures to manipulate their bond. Before leaving, Raphael offered a subtle warning. Temptation and danger often come dressed as opportunity. Be vigilant and never underestimate the city's ability to observe, even in the most private spaces. Marie nodded, absorbing both the caution and the intrigue. Daniel's hand found hers under the table, a silent promise. Together, they would face whatever Miami threw at them. After Raphael departed, Marie and Daniel sat quietly on the terrace, absorbing the tension of the encounter. The city's glow shimmered on the water below, beautiful yet treacherous. "Every encounter strengthens us," Daniel said softly. "Miami may tempt, test, or threaten, but desire and trust are ours." Marie's eyes softened, reflecting gratitude, pride, and an unspoken spark of shared adventure. By the time the night deepened, both understood that Miami's social machinery was relentless. Observers, influencers, and hidden eyes could appear in the guise of guidance, advice, or temptation. But together, they had cultivated a bond resilient enough to navigate desire, secrecy, and danger. And somewhere in the city, the next challenge waited, disguised, seductive, and unavoidable. The city had tested their trust with charm and subtle threats, but Miami had one more challenge in store, one that would blur the lines between temptation, desire, and danger. That night, the city of Miami pulsed with energy, neon lights reflecting off slick streets and the glimmering waters of Biscayne Bay. Marie and Daniel returned to the mansion after a day filled with subtle observation, warnings, and social maneuvering. Both felt the weight of external scrutiny pressing on them, yet also the magnetic pull of desire, an attraction intensified by the tension of the city's watchful eyes. Marie guided Daniel to the terrace, where soft candlelight created a private bubble against the city's gaze. The wind carried the scent of salt and night-blooming flowers. "Miami tempts us with risk at every turn," Marie murmured, her eyes reflecting both challenge and desire. Daniel reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining, reinforcing trust in the midst of danger. A soft knock interrupted their moment. Marie's pulse quickened. Daniel moved instinctively to the door, his protective instincts primed. On the step stood Lena, the stylish young observer, this time with a private invitation for a high-profile Miami gala that promised discretion yet subtly hinted at social exposure. "I thought you might want to attend," she said, her tone carefully measured. "It's informative." Marie studied Lena carefully, reading subtext in the carefully chosen words. "Informative," she repeated. "Or revealing?" Lena's faint smile acknowledged the question without confirming it. Daniel tightened his grip on Marie's hand, silently affirming solidarity. "We'll decide together," he whispered. Marie nodded, knowing that attending meant navigating a blurred line between desire, exposure, and social intrigue. Inside the mansion, Marie prepared for the gala with deliberate elegance. Her gown was a flowing midnight blue, shimmering subtly in the low light, her makeup emphasizing both age-defying grace and an air of mystery. Daniel chose a sleek suit, confident and understated, a visual reflection of both protection and partnership. The pair's synergy, age, desire, and trust, was evident in every step, glance, and touch. At the gala, Miami's elite mingled under sparkling chandeliers, the air thick with whispers, ambition, and calculated charm. Observers noted Marie and Daniel immediately. The unusual pairing, the confident presence, the subtle signals of trust and intimacy. Each glance and touch was magnified under scrutiny, yet they navigated it seamlessly, a careful dance of desire, discretion, and social strategy. Raphael appeared at the gala as well, moving with practiced grace, his eyes flicking between Marie and Daniel. Unlike before, his presence carried an added weight, subtle evaluation, and a challenge. He spoke briefly to Marie, offering advice under the guise of casual conversation. Daniel's eyes never left Raphael's face, a silent shield of protection while still allowing Marie to interact strategically. Later, a private room within the gala was suggested by Lena, a secluded lounge filled with soft music, ambient lighting, and plush seating. A place for conversation, she said cryptically, or for observation. Marie and Daniel entered cautiously, aware that every movement, gesture, and glance could be interpreted by unseen watchers. The room's intimate atmosphere heightened both desire and tension, testing their composure under scrutiny. In the lounge, they shared a quiet moment, their hands brushing, eyes locked. Miami tempts, tests, and observes, Marie whispered, her lips near Daniel's ear. And yet it cannot define what we feel. Daniel's hand moved to hers, interlacing fingers tightly. Then we define it ourselves, he replied, their bond stronger than any outside scrutiny. As the night continued, they realized the high-stakes environment had not weakened their connection. Instead, it had sharpened it. Every glance, touch, and word had been a calculated test of trust and desire, and together they had navigated the challenges with elegance, courage, and intimacy. Miami had blurred lines, but their bond had become a shield and a thrill all at once. The city had tested them with charm, observation, and subtle danger, but Miami's most perilous challenge yet awaited, and this time, it would test not only trust and desire, but secrecy itself. The morning after the gala, Miami shimmered under a bright sun, but the mansion felt tense, almost electric. Marie and Daniel sat in the library, reviewing the subtle signals from last night, the glances, whispers, and silent evaluations. Each encounter had been a test, and the city's watchful eyes had noted their every move. Today, the city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what they would do next. A soft knock at the door startled them. This time, it was Victor, the socialite whose previous encounters had been both charming and threatening. He held an envelope in his hand, his expression unreadable. "I thought you'd want to see this," he said, placing it on the table. Marie opened it cautiously and found photographs, taken from angles that suggested someone had been watching them even inside the mansion. Daniel's eyes darted around the room. "Someone's inside our perimeter," he whispered, tension lacing his voice. Marie's hand instinctively brushed his, a gesture both comforting and grounding. "Miami is relentless," she murmured. "But we won't be intimidated." Together, they examined the photographs, noting the angles, the details, and the subtle suggestion that their privacy had been violated. Victor leaned casually against the doorway, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "The city rewards discretion," he said smoothly, "and punishes those who slip. Consider this a friendly warning." Marie's eyes flashed. "Or a threat," she countered softly. Daniel's jaw tightened, recognizing that Miami's social machinery could weaponize even subtle gestures. Marie made a calculated decision. "We handle this together," she said firmly. Daniel nodded, the silent promise in his eyes strengthening their bond. "Miami watches, but it doesn't control us." Their composure, though tested, remained intact. Every move from this moment onward would need to be deliberate, strategic, and, most importantly, protective of their connection. Later that afternoon, Marie and Daniel reviewed their security measures. Cameras, locks, and even discreet personnel were checked. The photographs had revealed more than observation. They suggested access. Miami had blurred lines once again. Trust, desire, and secrecy were now intertwined with vigilance. As evening fell, the mansion lights glimmered, and the city outside began to hum with nightlife. A soft knock announced another visitor, Lena, the stylish young observer. She held an envelope similar to Victor's. "Consider this your next step," she said, leaving it on the table before slipping away. Marie opened it and found a detailed account of Miami's social circles, emphasizing the exposure risks and subtle power plays surrounding them. Daniel studied the documents carefully. "Every move we make is being analyzed," he said quietly. Marie nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then we move with awareness, strategy, and trust," she replied, her eyes meeting his. The bond they had cultivated was no longer just emotional. It had become a shield against the city's scrutiny. That night, as they sat on the terrace overlooking Miami's glittering skyline, the reality settled in. The city had tested them with observation, charm, and subtle threats. But the true challenge was now, maintaining trust and desire while navigating a social web designed to expose secrets. Marie rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Miami may tempt and test us," she whispered, "but together, we are stronger than any shadow." Their secret had been probed, their bond tested, but Miami's next move would blur the line between temptation and revelation, pushing them closer than ever to exposure.